Hey guys, and welcome back for another tutorial. Today we're going to be doing something really fun. We're going to be making up a fun witch hat. Oh yes, it is getting to that time. The spooky season is almost upon us. I can already feel it's getting crisper in the morning. Oh my goodness, summer is almost over. It's not fun. I'm not looking forward to it. To winter at least. Fall can come. I love fall, you know, all things fall, but not winter. So this is the lovely witch hat. How beautiful is she? I made this out of Dollar Tree fabric, and I went ahead and I just kind of randomly quilted it all together. Isn't that beautiful? We're going to talk about the interfacing, everything you need to know. So if you're a beginner, this is definitely the tutorial that you're going to want to watch, because we're going to go step by step through this. If you are an avid sewist, feel free to use the chapters to skip ahead to parts where you're unsure. But yeah, hopefully you'll be able to get out a lot of information from this tutorial to give you the confidence to be able to make a fun witch hat this spooky season. Okay, so first off, the pattern that will be in the description box down below. It is a paid pattern located over at my Etsy shop. But there is going to be a free pattern for a little mini hat. And oh my goodness, where is it? Here it is. Isn't she beautiful? Now we're gonna have a lot of fun with this little hat, and we're gonna make this into a wearable hat. I know, it's so cute. But of course you can have a lot of fun with this, where you can hang this from the ceiling, or you can, you know, put it on a doll or a ornament. I have a pumpkin I can put it on. There's just so many things that you can put this on. It is the perfect size as a little mini hat. But this is free for you as a gift. You can have fun with this and do all sorts of things. And again, there will be a tutorial of me making this and having a lot of fun kind of decorating it, and you're gonna love that video. But today we're going to be making a traditional witch hat, and in that pattern there's going to be 5 different sizes. There's going to be toddler, children's, a youth, and then an adult small, and then an adult large. So you could call that a medium or a women's and a men's. But really what it comes down to is your head circumference. So you're going to want to measure your head circumference and then just choose the size that you think would best suit your head or for your child. So of course, if you're new to the channel, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. If you make any of these projects, I would love to see them, so come over to my social media. All those links will be down in the description box as well. And I did open up memberships for this channel, so if you're interested in getting some sneak peeks or behind the scenes content, feel free to join. The join button is also down below. I guess without further ado, let's get into the tutorial. Okay, so you're gonna go over and you're gonna grab the pattern. This is the pattern here. This is the cone pattern piece, and this is the brim pattern piece. There's going to be 5 different sizes as well as a mini version, and we're going to talk about that a little later, and also have a subsequent video to show you how to make the mini hat. So you can choose the size. So I would just measure around the circumference of your head, or just go with the guide that's provided in the pattern as to what size you think, if it's for your child or for somebody else. Just choose your appropriate size. So I'm going to go with the 24 inch, which is, I'm going to consider the adult women size. But again, it can be for a 24 inch head, so it doesn't really matter. So I went ahead and actually had a little bit of fun cutting out my pattern pieces. Now, I don't usually do this, but I have some beautiful Dollar Tree fabric, and I only had small pieces, so I quilted my pattern pieces, and it just turned out so fun. I didn't have any like real rhyme or reason. I just kind of went a little random. But I think it turned out really cute to be able to incorporate all of the different pattern pieces and to really use up my stash, because it's just a bunch of scraps from previous projects. So to be able to make it into a large piece of fabric, was really great. So I'm using that for the exterior of my hat, and then I'm just using a regular quilt cotton, just a navy blue. I'm going to go ahead and show you how I prepared the brim piece, just because that piece I like to do in a very specific way. Of course, any pattern piece, you put the template onto your fabric and then you cut it out. Super easy. But because this is a curved pattern, I really want this to be precise. So I'm going to iron on the interfacing onto the back of my interior brim piece with you, and then we're going to cut it out together. Of course, you can do it any way you want, but just make sure that it is precise when you do cut it out. So I'm going to go over a little bit of information about the interfacing, just because this might be something new for you. If you are a beginner sewist, you might not know what interfacing is. It's basically a product that you can buy that will help to stiffen your fabric, especially when you're dealing with a witch hat where you want to have some rigidity in the cone so that you can see that it's a witch hat. Now, of course, if you don't want it to be rigid and you want it to be a little more slouchy, then you can choose what type of interfacing you use. It just, again, it all depends on what your preference is. So for this one, I actually used quilt batting and also medium weight interfacing. Now, quilt batting is just the stuff that goes in between layers of fabric to make your quilt, so it keeps it warm. So this would actually kind of be a warm hat if you think about it. But you could use a fusible fleece or a heavier weight like Peltex or Decoville Light. All that information, again, will be in the pattern for you. But again, it's sort of a preference type deal when it comes to the look that you're trying to achieve with your hat. But if you were to make this out of quilt cotton and no interfacing, then it would virtually, I'll show you. Here's a test. This is what your hat would look like. Again, if you're going for this look, then by all means, don't use any interfacing. But if you want a classic witch hat look, I almost wish my brim was a little bit more rigid. So you can see that this is what the look that you would get with quilt batting. So if you use something like Peltex or Decoville Light, it would definitely hold its shape a little bit more. But yeah, choose your correct interfacing, choose your cotton fabric, no stretch, have fun. If you have some fun quilt cottons, if you went over to Dollar Tree like I did, I would love to see it though. So definitely hit me up over on social media and show me your finished witch hat, because this is always a super exciting time to be able to dress up or dress your kids, right? Okay, so let's get into ironing on the interfacing onto the interior brim piece. Okay, so the first thing I did was I sort of crudely cut out my cotton fabric just to make sure that it was larger than my pattern piece, and also did the same thing with my fusible interfacing. This is a medium weight. It has glue on one side, so making sure that the glue side is up. I'm just placing my cotton fabric on top, and then we're going to use our hot dry iron, and we are going to fuse that interfacing onto the back. Now, the reason why I like to do it this way is because sometimes when you are using your iron, you can actually warp your cotton fabric. So to make sure that our pattern stays the right shape and everything goes together perfectly, we just want to secure the interfacing on first and then cut out our pattern last. Now, if you are using a quilt batting, again, that is not an interfacing product, but we're using it in the same sort of instance. You could use an adhesive to spray onto the back and apply it onto the back of your fabric, or you could quilt, and that's kind of what I did here. Was I quilted it and then I cut out my template once I've quilted the fabric. But we really just don't want our cotton fabric to become misshapen when we do cut out our pattern piece. Okay, so there we have it. We have that all done. And what I like to do is I like to flip it over. And this interfacing is great because you can actually draw on it. So I'm going to go ahead and get a marker. We'll get a couple pattern ways just to make sure that this isn't going to move around. And then I'm going to draw. I'm going to trace it. Now, if you wanted to cut this out with a rotary cutter around the edge, you could definitely do that. I don't recommend using your rotary cutter on the inside of this template. But if you wanted to do it on the outer edge, you could definitely do that. Now, when you do get this pattern, you will notice that there are two options. There is the half brim pattern piece and the full brim pattern piece. It's up to you. If you want to save on paper, then print out the half brim. That's really just the reason why. Is just to save on paper, have a not such a large pattern piece because it is large and for storage. But if you're like me and you're, again, want to be precise, then cut out the large brim piece and then draw all over your paper. Okay, there we go. So I'm just going to get my fabric scissors. We can put our pattern piece away and we can cut it out. Okay, so that is the outside, and then I'm just going to cut a slit and we'll cut out the center. And cut on the outside of that line that you drew to make sure that this piece ends up being the perfect size. Now, as I'm doing this, if I didn't have the interfacing, it would actually cause my fabric to warp and stretch. Although it is cotton fabric, cotton does tend to stretch on the bias, which is like the crossways. So that's why it's so important to have a fusible interfacing to prevent that from happening. And there is our brim. Okay, so now we have our pattern pieces all assembled or cut out. That's all you're gonna need for this project. And now we can kind of put the lining together and the exterior together. Now this pattern is a 3/8 of an inch seam allowance, so make sure that you keep that in mind when you are sewing this together so that everything goes together smoothly. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is we are going to sew the cone shape of our hat, and we're going to take that and we're going to put it right sides together, lining up the long straight edge. My son made me this beautiful little dish here, so of course I need to add that into my beautiful videos. He was so proud. Okay, and then we're just going to sew down that with a 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. But we're going to go ahead and repeat that step on the second or the lining piece of fabric. Okay. Okay. Okay, so now we're going to do the lining, but we're going to do this one a little bit different. We're going to sew, we're going to leave a gap in this row of stitching. So I'm just going to sew up about 4 inches. We'll cut our threads and then we'll move up like 4 inches and then now that hole is going to be left so that we can turn our hat right sides out. Okay, so now once you've had these two pieces sewn, we're just going to go ahead and take the bulk off of the tip. And so we're just going to cut towards it, kind of miter that corner, but try not to cut those stitches. And we'll do the same thing with the lining piece. That's just going to give us a nice sharp point when we turn it right sides out. Okay, so now we're going to prepare our pieces so that we can attach the cone to the brim. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take my cone and I'm going to actually, I already have my fold here. So we have that sewn edge. So I'm just going to snip a little triangle on that side. So we're just quartering this cone. So then we're going to flatten it the opposite way, lining up the side seam with the other notch. And we'll go ahead and cut another notch. And now we have all 4 quarter points of our cone done. And we can go ahead and repeat that with the lining fabric. So just, you can also mark it with a chalk or a marker, disappearing ink pen. But as long as you keep this little notch smaller than 3/8 of an inch, you should not see it when you sew it up. Okay, just like that. So we found the quarter points of our cone, and now we're going to do the same thing, finding the quarter points of our brim. So what we're going to do with that is we're just going to fold it in half and then fold it down and then snip. And then I will spin it, fold it again so that those first 2 notches line up. Just like that. And then we'll go ahead and repeat that with the lining. Okay, so I have a bone folder here. This is what I like to use to be able to poke out corners. So I'm going to go ahead and take my exterior cone piece and I'm going to flip that right sides out. And then I'm going to take my little bone folder and carefully poke out. Now because this is that quilt batting, it's not going to be really, really sharp. And you don't want to do it too much because you don't want to end up poking a hole right through the top of your hat, which I have done before. And you can kind of see how it's going to look. So now we're going to go ahead and take some clips and we are going to line up the quarter point. So we're putting the cone inside the underside of our brim and we will line up the quarter point. So we're going to line up the quarter points. So I'm just going to do the seam with one of the quarter points. Go to the other side where my little notch is and put another clip. You can do pins as well. And then that quarter point and that quarter point. Now, if you've done any sort of fussy cutting and you have a section of your brim that you want to be on the front or the side of your hat, just be mindful as to where you're placing it. You know, if you put something on the cone, you know, and you want to make sure that it's lined up with the brim. This is where, you know, you can kind of see if you like where your fabric is placed. Especially for mine, it's kind of busy, you can't really tell. But for something like this, where I definitely had some patterns going on, and all I did was to achieve this is I used some metallic silver thread and drew on the black fabric and then just sewed it out with top stitching. But as you can see, I wanted the majority of my spider webs to be on the front. So now that we've done our quarter points, I'm going to go ahead and add a few more to, it's kind of counter, I don't know how to say this, but like it's difficult because you're doing an inside curve with an outside curve. So the more clips and pins you use, the better that it will be. And I really do recommend you pinning this or clipping it beforehand and not just kind of, you know, starting to sew it because it is a curve. It just, it complicates things. So to make sure everything is nice and even and perfect, if there's any sort of little puckers, we will try to even those out. But that's why it's important for you to cut out a very precise pattern so that everything fits perfectly. So now we have everything nice and clipped, then we're able to sew this. So I'm just going to go ahead and do the same thing and repeat with the lining fabric. Now with the lining cone shape, you don't need to poke out this corner because technically it will be inside out. It's the inside of our hat, so we're just going to flip it right sides out, but I'm not going to poke the cone shape. We're just going to leave it like that. And again, flip it over and then we will put it on the inside. Just want to make sure that your right side of the brim is touching the right side of the cone. Okay, there you go. Okay, so we're going to start sewing. I don't have an arm, so if you're able to move or take off a part of your machine, it might be easier to go around the arm of your machine. This is the way that I usually tend to do it. I like to have my brim up to make sure, because that is the part that's most likely going to pucker or kind of pleat. so you're able to control and smooth out your fabric as you're sewing, making sure you do 3/8 of an inch seam allowance, and then we'll start going. Okay, now because it's a little bit stiffer, I'm actually going to up my seam allowance, or sorry, up my stitch length. It tends to make smaller stitches. So making sure we're just kind of flattening it and going. I like to have this little guy handy. This is one of those little surgical doodad things that have the little alligator teeth there. So if you ever need to get in and grab your fabric to make sure that it aligns, I really like to use that tool. This helps a lot if I'm sewing the mini version of this hat. But again, we want to make sure that everything lines up. Hopefully this is a better angle for you. See how the fabric just wants to wrinkle. You do it. Your foot. Okay, so once you have it sewn, we're just going to take it over to the ironing board, and you can press it all nice and flat at the base. Make sure that it's as flat as you can get it. There might be some very tiny little pin tucks. That isn't as big of a deal on the lining, but if you can, if it's on the exterior pieces, you might want to pick out your stitches and try to fix that. I mean, thankfully on something like this, very busy, there's lots going on, and we're not even going to be able to really see any puckers, but I did pretty good. Pretty good. Now from here, if you feel the need to, you can go ahead and cut little kind of notches in, and this will kind of help to relax the top cone area. Just make sure you don't cut your stitches. All right. A slit is fine. You don't need to do triangles really. Now we can put the lining into our witch hat and we'll be almost done. Okay, so now what we're going to do is we are going to push the cone down and we are going to basically put the hat into the other one. Now I like to line up the side seam with the side seam from the hat. That's not really super important, but I just prefer to do it. Making sure your fabric is right sides together. And then you're just going to clip all the way around. Now, if you want to insert anything into your brim, you want to do any, how do you say, some lace or ruffle trim, this is where I would do that. I would put it in between the layers. But if not, then we're just going to flatten it nicely. And then we're just going to sew around the whole entire thing with a 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. So we're just going to sew all the way around. So now we have our two hats sewn together and we have this outer edge. I'm going to use my pinking shears and we're going to trim off some of the seam allowance. This is going to help to reduce the bulk when we turn it and also allow the fabric to sort of, because it's an outside round, when we go to flip it, this fabric is actually going to kind of bunch. So that's why we take away that, and then it won't be bulky. So this is a little exhausting on the hand. If not, I would cut little triangles all the way around. Especially for this one where there's a lot of bulk. You could also choose to just keep your interfacing out of your seam allowances, and that would mean that you would cut your interfacing piece just 3/8 of an inch smaller on all pieces to prevent that. If not, grab your pinking shears. This always hurts the hand. All right, now that my hand is now officially exhausted, we're done. Okay, so now we're going to use that hole that we left in the side. So let's go ahead and turn this right sides out. Okay. Now I'm going to grab that bone folder or your favorite turning tool, point turner, and I like to push it into the edge of the brim to kind of push out that seam allowance. And again, you're gonna get that iron nice and hot so we can press everything nice and flat. And this is why we didn't poke out the inside of that cone, because it's going to go straight up into the top of the hat. Now you could make this into a reversible hat if you wanted to. You know, make the inside as pretty as the outside. We are going to close up that hole, and you can use your sewing machine for that, or if you are making it a reversible hat, you might want to do an invisible hand stitch to close that up. But if not, I'm just going to do a quick top stitch. And I'm also going to go ahead and do a top stitching around the edge of the brim, and you can also do a top stitching along the bottom of the cone. So I've done it here and here, and then yeah, we're gonna close up that hole. You also don't need to if you don't want to, because it's inside the hat, no one's gonna see it. So if you don't want to, you don't have to. Okay, so I'm just gonna do a 1/4 inch seam allowance and go all the way around, and I also increased my stitch length to about a 3.5. Okay, so I went ahead and did the top stitch around the edge of the brim, and I pulled out the lining, and I just kind of brought it together like this, and I just did a simple top stitch. Again, I'm not going to see it, so I don't really care, but if you did want to make this hat reversible, then you might want to do invisible stitch, or at least, no, you for sure want to do an invisible hand stitch, that's for sure. But there we go. Okay, and we're done. How cute is this? I love how this turned out. It did take a while to do the quilting, but I'll tell you, it was worth it. It just looks so fun, patchworky, and just has all the elements of the spooky season right in one hat. So I hope that you enjoyed this tutorial and you give it a try. Of course, all the social media is all down below, Instagram and TikTok. So if you do decide to make this, I would love to see it. So please tag me at charmedbyashley in videos or photos. But first, we need to give it a test run. We gotta see if it fits. Okay, so we're gonna take out the hair. All right, you ready? All right. So I'm not exactly sure how witch hats are supposed to fit on your head, but I think it more just kind of sits. It's not going to be like a super secure hat, like a baseball hat where you feel like you're like really, just kind of sits on top, and you don't want it to be too close to your ears or pushing your ears down. But I think it turned out so cute. And I love it. And if you wanted to put a little string around, you know, under your chin for a child, you could definitely do that, or a ribbon. And you can also, you know, decorate it with any sort of, you know, you can get some like roses or spiders or spider webs or tulle from the Dollar Tree and kind of have fun and decorate it up. I've also seen people take them and also kind of like pinch the side. All right, just do like little pleats, and then you have like kind of like, I'm gonna say like a Harry Potter hat, like someone on, you know, one of those guys, right? So you just kind of pinch in like a few different parts, and then you have more of a traditional looking, you know, this is more like a fun, happy, This is like a not very nice witch look. But anyways, I hope that you enjoyed again. Check out the next video where we do sew up this adorable little mini hat. Have fun with this. Turn it into a little wearable hat. It's gonna be so cute. I'm excited. Again, or you can just kind of stick it around the house. How cute! I actually put this on my thread, my spool of thread, so as the thread was coming off, it was spinning. And I was like, that's cute. So thank you so much for watching, and if you have any questions, don't hesitate to ask in the comments. Also, if you have any suggestions for future videos, if you are making any Halloween costumes and you kind of need some help, I could definitely, you know, maybe I could try to make a video specifically for you. You know, it never hurts to ask, and you just never know. So thank you so much for watching, and I will see you guys in my next video. Bye guys.